Why in 2022 are we still assessing learners the same way we did 20, 30 years ago? Why are we still using one assessment for one outcome for every outcome in every unit that we teach them? In this, I want to show you how my team reduced 25 learning outcomes down to 5 project-based assessments. 25 to 5, reducing the assessment burden. We're all aware that college can be quite an intimidating and overwhelming experience for a lot of learners, and we can compound that by just an excessive amount of assessments. And sometimes unknown to lecturers and unknown to those that are actually designing the assessments, there's a lot of repetition. We've been all guilty of getting our timetables as lecturers, as facilitators, getting our timetables, looking at what units that we're teaching, going straight to the awarding body's website, pulling a unit spec and looking at the learning outcomes, and then designing our assessments around those learning outcomes. And whilst that's maybe something that has happened for years or is tradition within a department, a lot of times it's actually not, I think, the right way to go about it. I had recently done a talk at the College Development Network's at College Expo, and I put a question out to the participants, which was, does anybody know how many learning outcomes makes up a HNC? Now, the answer is roughly 26. And if we take that and we look at a 2-year HND, we then have the answer is about 48 to 50. Now, that's a huge amount, especially if we think that one learning outcome equals one assessment. And I absolutely believe that that is not the case. I think that we can look to integrate things, and we can also look not just to integrate things within a unit, but actually to integrate things with from multiple units. And this is something that I led on when we moved to a new HND framework in one of our sound production courses. And it's a very simple method that I used that allowed my staff to really take ownership of the assessment. And I have here what we used, and it's simply index cards. And you might not see it on the camera, but on the front of the index card is the learning outcome, and on the back is the unit that it's from. Now, I had spent the night before I made up these cards, and I'd asked the staff not to look at unit specs and not to look at learning outcomes, so that they were going into this exercise quite fresh. And I essentially asked them to pile or to create no more than 5 piles of these cards with learning outcomes that they thought that worked well together. They weren't allowed to turn the cards over. They weren't allowed to see what unit they were from. It was the other reason why I asked them not to really look at anything in advance. And they then piled these cards together, and they created, I think it was about 4 or 5 different piles. Now, that already saw the integration between not just the learning outcomes, but the units themselves, because there were more than 5 units on the framework, but I was only asking for 5 projects. The staff did it great. They actually did it differently from me. I had done the same exercise the night before, I just to see what I would come up with. And the staff members themselves, they came up with something quite different from what I had, which comes back to something which I think I said earlier, which is they take ownership of their assessments or of this assessment design. It's a very simple exercise to do. You take the learning outcomes, you write them on the cards, you ask your staff to pile them in a design that works for them, that they think makes sense. They're the specialists. You're then reducing the assessment burden. What we're not reducing is the quality of the assessment. We're not reducing the integrity of the assessment. But what we are doing is that we're reducing just the sheer number, and we're also reducing the duplication. I think we've all seen a framework, or we've all seen a collection of units that there will be 1 or 2 or maybe more that the learning outcomes from unit to unit are duplicated. Now, why do we ask a learner to do the same thing multiple times and be assessed on it multiple times? Doesn't make sense to me, doesn't make sense to the learners. But if staff only look at their unit descriptor and create their assessments based on that, then that's where that duplication happens. You get all the staff in a room together, you do a simple exercise like this, then it's very, very simple that they see the integration and they get to see the HND, the HNC, whatever qualification you're running as a whole, and they're part of that whole rather than just their unit. The original premise was that we had poor KPIs. We had year-on-year poor achievement within this qualification. I used the idea that we were moving to a new framework to really just try something new, try something different. And that year, we saw about a 30 or 35% increase in our KPIs. It became a very successful course, and it showed me and proved to me as a proof of concept. It's a technique that I have used with the other qualifications that we run within the department, and we're seeing the same success. It might not work for everybody. It might not work for your qualification, but if you can, I would absolutely say give it a try. We've seen great success, and it's a technique that I would really recommend that you try.